Hello there, dear viewer. Now, there weren't that many synthesizer releases during 2019 for iOS. I did compile a list, and maybe it's not complete. I don't know, I might have missed something. And if I did, well, it just means I did. So this is the list I made my top picks from. Let me just say that if you're a regular viewer of this channel, then there is this one thing that I chose for this list that might surprise you a lot. So hello and welcome to haQ. My name is Jakob. I'm your host and you're watching a haQ episode. Okay, so first up is Factory Modular Synthesizer by Bytes. It was released back in May 2019 and a lot of people seem to like this one, and I'm not surprised. It's really awesome. But before we get into what it is I actually like about this one, let's do the feature splash screen. This gives you a nice overview of what an app might support or not support. So everything in green means supported, everything in red means not supported. And as you can see, everything is green across the board. The only thing I want to highlight is that Factory is for iPad only and is not available for iPhone. Now, to be honest, I really don't know where to start with Factory here. There's so much packed into it, it could need its own video. However, this is supposed to be a top list, and so I need to keep it short, so I'm gonna highlight a few things. Now, this thing was built for modulation, and a lot of it. If you look at the routing matrix, the first time I saw it, I thought, hey, there's actually not that many sources and destinations, but then I tapped one of the names here and suddenly a list popped up with loads of more options in it. And it's like this for both the sources and the destination. The routing matrix has some really interesting randomization options too. You can randomize both the source and destinations, but when it comes to actually routing stuff, then you have this thing up here that just looks like a box, but as soon as you slide it, stuff will happen, and then you can go down here and just tweak this knob. You can go into the list right above it to choose either from tweak or mutate, and other things will happen. Another pretty neat feature in here is the morph feature. So this will allow you to morph between two states. If you've ever used Beep Street's Sunriser synth, then you're probably familiar with this type of feature. With this, you can easily create a preset or a patch that has, kind of two built-in presets or patches in them, since you can morph between the states and you can get wild between the states. It's a huge amount of fun to play around with. Alright, so there's this one thing I really enjoy having access to inside the sequencer page. And I probably love it so much because it very much reminds me of my most favorite synthesizer on desktop. And I'm talking about Massive from Native Instruments. It was my go-to synth for many years. And it has this performance option for the modulation that just look at this. Huh? Now, I'm not saying that Factory is some sort of a massive clone. It really isn't. It's definitely not a clone of Massive. However, there are a few things in here that just makes me think of Massive. Right, I cannot go on forever about this since this is a top list. So there's so much packed into Factory and it would need its own video. Maybe I'll do that at some point. I don't know. I don't promise anything. We'll just have to see. My next top pick is Virtual Ants 3 by Alexander Zolotov. Now, this one isn't really new to the App Store. It used to exist before. You see, this version 3, was released as a new thing, as a new synth. You had to purchase it in order to get a hold of it, even if you purchased the previous version. Well, the previous version is gone. It is no more. Why, you might ask? Well, long story short, the first version was released back in October 2013, but the update stopped around 2016, around there. And then Apple switched out the architecture for iOS and its devices to go from 32 bits up to 64 bits, and now developers had to upgrade their stuff. I'm just guessing here, but I think that Virtual Ants, since it was an older app, it was made for the older 32-bit architecture. And so when Apple cleaned out the App Store and removed all of the 32-bit apps, Virtual Ants just got swept up into that and just disappeared. I thought it was gone forever. Maybe a lot of you did think the same thing, but apparently we were wrong. The developer Alexander Zolotov has been working hard on this one, and he's been adding a lot of new stuff, including giving it support for AUV3. But there's more than that. If you check the changelog for this thing, it reads like a tech manual. Now, I want to keep it short, so I'm just gonna mention 2 new things that I really enjoy in Virtual Ants 3. Alright, so real quickly, for those of you who don't know anything about Virtual Ants, it basically allows you to load pictures, and then it uses those pictures to produce audio or synthesized audio. Not only can it load pictures, you can of course load WAV files too. What I like the most about Virtual Ants is that when you're working with it, it doesn't feel like working with any type of conventional synthesizer, because you're not twisting the regular stuff like filter knobs or oscillator knobs or anything like that. It feels more like working with a photo editor or drawing editor, because you have up to 6 layers where you can load either pictures or audio files, or you can draw your own shapes. You have various types of brushes with various types of shapes and various types of opacity settings. And when we're talking about opacity, we're hitting something here that is new. You see, these 6 layers can now be MIDI mapped, so you can control them with a MIDI controller. And that's pretty nice. Instead of using a knob to control a filter, you're actually controlling the opacity of a picture layer. I like it. Right, so the new MIDI implementation inside Virtual Ants is really great, because you can now utilize or play Virtual Ants more like a conventional instrument, even though it doesn't produce sounds like a conventional instrument. And then it makes sense to implement something like the next new feature I'm going to talk about, and it's the envelope. So this didn't exist in the earlier version of Virtual Ants. You just activate this, and now you can actually set stuff like attack, decay, sustain, and release, making Virtual Ants even more playable as an instrument. One thing I do want to suggest that you experiment with is vocal material. I'm sure you'll be positively surprised with what you can do with vocal materials inside this thing. You are watching haQ. Now, if you have been following this channel for a while, then my next app choice for this top list will surprise you a lot. Released back in September 2019, Myrac, or Mirac? I think it's Myrac. Well, it's this thing here. It's a Eurorack type modular system for iPad, and it is absolutely amazing. I mean, this is a creative platform. You can do whatever you want, especially with that many modules at hand. And so you can basically let your creativity run free with over 500 modules. This thing basically has anything you could possibly want. Not everything, but almost everything, which is close enough. Now, to any new viewers, the reason to why my regular viewers might be shocked by my choice here of choosing a modular app, well, it's because they've heard me say several times over these years how much I've grown to loathe working with cables. Whether it's hardware or virtual applications, it's something I do not enjoy doing. I don't have the patience for it anymore. I've done it a lot in the past, but I've really grown not to like that type of workflow. And so if you've ever wondered, going through my videos, searching my channel, why you can't find any videos on modulars where you have to route cables, well, now you know. However, last year, 2019, I was invited to this event called Thomann Synth Reactor. And over there, I met Jim DeBardi from Moog. And he sat down with me and tried to convince me to go modular once again. And to some degree, he actually did manage to do just that. Just enough for me to get interested once again. The guy is basically responsible for me purchasing my rack. Well, I am glad that I hit the purchase button for this thing because I've had a lot of fun with it. The app supports audio in and out, so you can build your own effects with this thing. It supports MIDI and MIDI mapping, so you can basically control this with your MIDI controllers. It also runs on iPhone, and here's the neat thing with this. You see, when you're saving your presets, it's saving it through the file system, and it utilizes iCloud saving, meaning your patches can be available on any device. If you are into modulars like this, then definitely get my rack. Next up, we have Lagrange synthesizer by IceWorks, formerly known as Ice Gear. And for me, it always gets confusing with the IceWorks and the Ice Gear, so I'm just gonna use the developer's name. Okay, so to be completely honest, I've always liked Satoshi's apps. I love the overall sound of his apps. There's something he does with his sound. I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but I can put my fingers on his apps. And I have done that a lot. So basically, Lagrange is what you get when you take everything that Satoshi has previously made and put it into this one synth. If you've used any of Satoshi's previous synth apps, then you'll instantly recognize the sound. You'll recognize the way that the interface is laid out, how all of the modulation options are always tied right into the graphical user interface without you having to do any types of setups. What I like about Lagrange is that it gives you this very, very wide sonic palette in the forms of algorithms or synth engines, depending on how you want to view it. You can make everything from FM sounds to car plus strong type sounds, or string synthesis if you will, to vocal sounds to regular analog-like sounding sounds. You have a really nice range of different types of noise, different types of filters, and on top of it all, you have this routing feature that kind of resembles the routing feature you'd find inside an FM synthesizer. You know, when you want to route around all the FM operators, only in this case, instead of just routing around the oscillators, you're also routing around the noise generator and the filter. And many of these routing combinations can drastically change the way a patch sounds. Now, I have actually done a full review/tutorial for Lagrange, and if you want to go watch that video, you can find it in the card that pops out in the upper right corner. You can also find a link to that video down in the description. Now, I highly recommend Lagrange synthesizer, and okay, that was the... There goes the batteries. In any case, I do recommend Lagrange synthesizer. It sounds absolutely great. It's got the feature splash screen all in the greens, and I mean, it supports iPad and iPhone. What more do you want? Now, I know this is a top 5 list, and I will be revealing my 5th and last top pick for this list. But there is this one app that didn't really fit this list because it does contain a synthesizer, but it isn't just purely a synth. So stick with me and you'll get what I mean. Right, so my last pick is Shockwave by Aras. This one was released back in December 2019, and it was a nice rounding up of the year actually. What a great synth. I actually had access to this synthesizer in many months before it was released, and I was also hired by Kai to make the presets for this thing. I didn't make all of them, but I made a whole bunch. My presets are basically factory content. I want to take this opportunity to send out a huge thank you to the community for the love you sent my way after trying out my presets. And I also want to thank Kai for giving me the opportunity to build presets for his new synth. Okay, so one of the biggest strengths of Shockwave is how it does modulation. It's not that it can modulate, it's how you modulate stuff, how you control that. You see, the only thing you need to do is to long press on a control and this pops up. And from here on out, you can just slide your fingers left and right. So you can choose whatever source you want to use for modulating that particular control. It's so accessible. Modulation never ever becomes a chore. You're not sitting trying to do stuff in a list, in a matrix. You have a direct access right there. And I wish that a lot of synthesizers did it this way. Modulating inside Shockwave is a lot of fun. On top of that, it has a very interesting sequencer that can be run in several different modes, and so it can be used for doing loads of different stuff. And of course, the sequencer can be used to modulate stuff inside the synth. Shockwave has a unique sound to it thanks to its phase distortion type synthesis. It's kind of like FM synthesis. On top of that, it has a selector for different types of cross modulation, FM modulation, amplitude modulation, ring modulation, and phase modulation. The sonic palette in this one is really, really wide, and you can get a huge amount of different sounds out of it. Now, back when Shockwave was released, I did do a full feature, a full tutorial, demo, and review of this thing. And you can find that video popping up in the upper right corner here in this card. And you can also find a link to that video down in the description. Right, so before I completely round this list up, there was this one app I couldn't put on this list because this is a synthesizer top list. And it is Pure Acid by Dimitrij Pavlov, aka Jim Audio.
Badman ting, badman ting, badman ting, badman ting, badman ting. This is a badman ting, badman ting, badman ting.
Yo, badman ting, badman ting. This is a badman ting. It's a badman ting, badman ting. This is a badman ting. Really? Badman ting.
This isn't just a synth, it's a Groovebox app. It should be on another list, but it contains a synth that sounds incredible. And that's why I want to mention it in this video, even though it doesn't fit the list. If I just made top 5 apps, this would have been at the top of it. It's great. It's absolutely great. I did a full feature on the synth and its sequencer, which is really, really intuitive, and you should really go and watch it. You can find that video in the card in the upper right corner, and also linked down below in the description, together with an app link, of course. I do have another upcoming list. It's going to be a top list featuring apps that are basically FX plugins or processors, like, you know, compressors, equalizers, stuff like that. There were a ton of them coming out last year in 2019. And I'm not sure how many I'm going to pick for my list, but this might be a top 10 actually, or I might just limit myself to 3. I don't really know, but stay tuned for that. Now, if you found this video helpful, informative, or fun to watch in any way, then why don't you help me and the channel out by hitting that like button, because it's really, really helpful. And if you didn't agree with my list, you might have your own. Why don't you type it down there in the comments section and try to at least give a good argument for at least one of your topics. I'm always interested in hearing why someone likes something or why someone does not like something. So type away. Now, if you want to support my work here on the channel in a financial way, then you have these links here on the side. And you can also find my music up here if you go through this link. Yeah, that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. All comments and ratings are very much appreciated. Now, as usual, I wish you a very productive week. Now go finger all of your stuff and have a lot of fun doing it.
Yo, badman ting.
What?
Badman ting.
Really?
Badman ting.
A bad man thing?
What a badman ting.
What?
Badman ting.
A bad man thing?
What a badman ting.
Where?
Badman ting.
Just point to the...
Badman ting.
Badman ting,
What?